And we're going to begin with the 25th section of Under Plum Lake in the third part, which is also called Under Plum Lake. And this chapter is called Stretch, Stretch. Silently we drove through the mountains. He drove fast, though it was dark now. The moon wasn't up. I looked through the open roof and saw stars in the sky and looked at him, but he still didn't speak. I couldn't think of too much to say myself, because my heart was full, so it went on like that. Then I couldn't bear it any more. "What is it?" I said. "I don't want you to go." "I don't want to go." "But I'll never forget you," he blurted out suddenly. "I want you to know that. You won't know it after they've properly erased you, but you can know it now." "How will I be erased?" I said. "Specialists will do it. It's a big operation, after all you've seen. They'll take out all you know of Egon. Then they'll take it out from the beginning, from when we met, they'll take it out from the beginning, from when we met, and put something else in its place. They'll put planted memories in to account for the missing time." "What kind of memories?" I said. "They'll invent them. They often bring people down to see what they know. Mainly they do it overnight and have them back in their beds again by morning. Or they get people wrecked at sea. They even let some of them stay a short time to get their reactions, but no one's seen as much as you." "Can't any of them remember when they get back?" "None of them." "Can't they even dream it?" "You can't dream something that isn't in your mind. Nothing of Egon is in their minds. It won't be in yours either." He was silent for a long time. "Will you be taking me back?" I said. "They're letting me, though I wasn't supposed to go before." Just then I remembered something I'd meant to ask him. Before. "What happened to the submarine?" I said. "What submarine?" "The one you brought me in." The road suddenly lit up ahead. It lit up for miles like a long yellow snake. It did it automatically on dangerous roads when another car was coming. We'd left the pass between mountains now. We were on a track over a precipice, and he'd slowed. The other car appeared presently and passed, and the road faded into darkness again. I saw him peering over the side. Something was glimmering below. "What is it?" I said. "Lake Umbra, the deepest in Egon." "What's in it?" "Nothing. That's the point of it. It gives an idea of the abyss. I'll show you." He stopped the car and fiddled with the dashboard, and we took off. We took off over the path and went down a few thousand feet to the lake. It was a black lake, very still, between mountain walls. He pressed a switch, and the car roof closed. Then we dropped in the water. We dropped and dropped in blackness. "Can you feel it?" he said. I felt something. Something was changing around me. "I can't see," I said. He switched the light on. The dashboard had moved. It had moved several feet ahead. It was still moving. It was 20 feet ahead, 30 and still going. The whole front of the car was stretching. The sides were stretching too. Ahead, a flimsy substance appeared between us and the dashboard. It turned solid. Just while I was looking, it turned into a wall. The car doors were turning into walls. I looked behind me and saw the back of the car had become a wall. And right the same moment, I realized the seat I was in wasn't the car seat anymore. It was an easy chair. He was in one too. We were at a low table. There was a carpet on the floor and a sofa along one wall. The room was about 30 feet long, and music began softly playing in it. "Recognize it?" he said. I was staring about, speechless. "You asked about it." He said, "Is this the submarine?" "It's a submarine, a car, a plane. It's my vehicle. It's programmed to do these things. It's just stretch mechanics." We were still dropping. We were dropping fast. We must have dropped thousands of feet before he stopped the boat. He slid a panel from beneath the table and pressed it, and the boat darkened and the wall lit up, except again I saw it wasn't the wall, but what was outside that had lit up. It hadn't lit up much. He pressed some more, but it didn't light up anymore. It stayed a mud color like fog. "That's all the light in it," he said. "It never took in any more. It's heavy water. They bring kids here to give them an idea of the abyss. They can't show them the abyss itself." "Why not?" "They can't," he said abruptly, and all of a sudden he said a lot more. It seemed to shoot out of him as if he'd bottled it up and couldn't hold it in any longer. He said he'd never get over how he'd killed me or the pain I'd suffered. I started telling him I'd already forgotten it, but he wouldn't let me speak. He said he wouldn't forget me. He kept saying it. He said he knew everything about me, and he liked me better than anyone in the world, and he couldn't bear to lose me, though he knew I had to go. We just floated a few thousand feet under the water, and he kept talking. He said he wouldn't let a day pass without thinking of me. He said if he got through his exam the way he wanted, he wouldn't just think of me, he'd be with me. He started telling me about the exam and what he wanted to do. He said it was mind communications. His grandfather was a director of the Thought Institute and had one of the minds they used for distant thought. He had 50,000 lines in his mind, and they used them continuously, like a telephone exchange, even when he was asleep. The minds weren't only used for transmitting messages. They ran factories. They ran power lines for space energy. They navigated ships in space. He said if he passed his exam, he'd do a year's preliminary and then another test to see if he was ready for the standard course. The course ran 80 years, then he'd go to university for another 30 before starting mind communications. I was slowly working it out. I worked out that if he did his preliminary and then the standard course, and after the university one, he'd be 210 before he started mind communications. I'd be 123 by then. I'd be long dead by then. I asked how he thought he'd be able to be with me just after passing the first test. He said the test wasn't anything. All you had to do was get on a thought wave with an examiner the other side of Egon. You got a flash in your mind when it happened. The examiner knew you'd be doing it. So you only had to get the time right. He said he could almost do it now. When my mind was so familiar, he knew he could do it with me. I asked if I'd known he'd be doing it. I asked if I'd know he'd be doing it. And he said I wouldn't. He said I wouldn't remember anything of him, not the slightest trace. And that made him so moody. He said he wanted to do something for me, something special, just to prove he'd never forget me. And suddenly he thought of it. We were going up then. We left the lake and he turned the boat back into a car and we hit the road and started off again. But he was so excited he couldn't speak for a few minutes. Then he began nodding and said he'd do it. He said it was an unbelievable thing, but he'd do it. I said, do what? He said, show you the abyss. I asked what was so special about the abyss. He said it was holy. He said there was no way I could imagine it. It was made of nothing. There was no air or gas or water in it, no energy, no time. But all life came from it, so it was holy. I asked how I'd know it was holy if I'd been erased. He said he'd bring my memory back. He'd bring back the part I needed to know. That he'd show me the abyss and it would prove he'd kept his promise. And he'd erase me again. He was sure he could do it, though he couldn't erase all I never... He said he was sure he could do that, though he couldn't erase all I knew now. No single person could, and only specialists could do the operation anyway. I asked what kind of operation it was, and he shook his head. He said the problem was the knowledge was all over my mind now. The doctor at the lake had told him mind was so active that even if you took out 99% of it, the 1% left could start remembering everything all over again. The specialists took everything out and put back what they had to, and several of them did it together so they could check everything went back in the right order and that the mind wasn't left mad. He saw I was scared, but he told me not to worry. He said he wouldn't leave me. He'd be with me all the time. He wouldn't say goodbye before the operation just to prove we'd say goodbye after. We'd see each other after and know each other after. And he promised it. It didn't stop me being scared, and it didn't help to look at him. I saw he was scared too. Even now, I can't remember it properly. I've been trying, and I can't. I know it happened in that palace. I know I was on a couch, and that his father was there, and that 5 of them did it. But I'm not sure it's my own memory. I might have got it from his memory. He was there. I know that. The 5 of them and his father had moved away, but he was standing still beside me, And he said, "They're discussing the easiest way to do it." I said, "Will I feel it?" "I'm sure you won't. I'm pretty sure," he said, but his lips were dry and he was licking them. "Anyway, I'll be with you, and I'll do what I promised. I'll keep nodding at you so you'll know I'll keep the promise." Then the specialists were back, and I was looking up at them, my heart thumping. "Just relax," one of them said. And that's all I remember any of them saying. They'd bent over me and stared right in my eyes, and I was blinking up at them. I could see Dido behind, still nodding and licking his lips, and I licked my own, and I waited for it to happen. I just kept blinking. I didn't stop blinking. What happened must have happened in a blink. And that's the end of the 25th section.